I'm excited to see some new names of people attending.
Elizabeth, do you want to open and I'll just go by to the blocks?
Sure.
Okay,
Mhm.
so I guess that's slides 1 through 6, and then I'll do the rest. Yes.
So it is 6:30, but we're going to give folks just another couple of minutes to arrive, just based on our experience. Somebody is here with iPhone 3. I'm curious if you are interested in identifying yourself.
Yeah, everybody can go to the participant section where they'll find their name at the top of the list of the participants. If your name is something other than what you like to be called, we just ask that you just hit the rename yourself button and change your name. Otherwise, whenever you raise your hand and participate later, you can just identify yourself.
I hope everybody's having a good back to school, back to work, end of summer. Thank you for that thumbs up from Sebastian. All right, I think I'm ready to get us started. It's actually really wonderful to see people here. So let's respect everyone's time and start our meeting. So
Do you want me to give the little preamble for folks who
yes,
maybe...
please.
All right. Well, welcome everyone. If this is your first time joining us, or maybe the first time in a long time, you'll notice that you're currently muted, and we're going to stay muted throughout the duration of the meeting. The only folks who will be unmuted at any given time are our co-chairs, Adam and Elizabeth. As we move through the agenda and through Adam's presentation, they may call on folks who want to participate. If you would like to participate, you can go to the React icon on your device and press the raise hand button there. It's not the wave or the thumbs up, as those will disappear. Only press the raise hand button once. If you press it a second time, your hand will go back down. If you're calling in from the phone, it's *9 to raise your hand and *6 to unmute. Be on the lookout for a prompt asking you to confirm unmuting whenever either of the co-chairs calls on you. If you're having problems, the chat is available for technical support. It's not to ask questions of the co-chairs. They will never see those chats. If you're using an older version of Zoom, you may need to go to the participant section where you'll find the raise hand feature there. And finally, we encourage you not to wave at the screen or raise your actual hand to get our attention. If you're having problems, just chat me. I'm here for support. And I'll hand it over to Elizabeth and Adam.
Thanks, Will. Okay, so let's now switch to Adam's screen.
Oh,
All right, Adam, you should be able to share your screen right now.
okay. Let's make this okay.
Better. Great.
Super. Okay. All right, thank you everybody for coming. Our agenda for tonight, let's go to the next page. I'm Elizabeth Rose. My partner is Adam Wald. He in the pink shirt. He will be doing a lot of the work today. Our agenda for this evening's meeting is pretty straightforward. We are going to discuss the portions of 2 blocks. And the discussion will focus on what do we think is an appropriate zone type for these 2 blocks in order to allow them to be developed for residential use. And those 2 blocks are portions of block 1569, which is 90th Street between First and York Avenues, and portions of block 1570, which is 91st Street to 92nd Street, again, between York and First Avenues. So we are only focusing on those 2 portions of blocks. They are the mid-block portions of those 2 blocks tonight. And then if there's any old business or new business. Next slide. I'm delighted to see some new names attending the meeting today. So we're going to give a little context for this task force and where we are in our process. This task force is looking at the blocks that are on the Upper East Side in Community Board 8's district that remain zoned for only commercial or manufacturing use today. So these are blocks that carry a zone either C8-4 or an M1-4. What you see below are the list of all of the blocks that have this designation. And I apologize, you can see in yellow are the blocks that we are discussing this evening, and it's 90th between First and York on the south side of the block, and then 90th on the north side, as well as the south side of 91st between First and York. So I misspoke earlier. We have been, over time, going through each of these blocks in a schedule to discuss each one individually. And you'll see what that schedule is for the remainder of our meetings in just a minute. Let's go to the next slide. Why are we looking at these blocks? There are certain permitted uses in these blocks, and then there are uses that are not permitted. So right now in an M14 zone, it can build up to 2 times the area of the lot for manufacturing use, or up to 6.5 times the area of the lot for a community facility. And it allows certain use groups, but not residential use. A C8-4 allows 5 times the area of the building in terms of floor area ratio to be built for commercial purposes, or 6.5 times for a community facility. And again, it has a few specified types of commercial uses. So currently, you could build on these properties commercial office space, you could build a school, you could build life sciences facilities, you could build a self-storage facility, you could build certain types of manufacturing facilities, warehouses. auto repair shops, parking garages. With a special permit, you could build a hotel, but you cannot build residential. And for an incredibly residential neighborhood and in a city with a desperate need for more residential housing, it seems very archaic to have portions of our community that are not allowed to be developed for residential use. So that is why this task force exists. Importantly, there is no height limit for building any of the allowable uses on these blocks, or on the portions of these blocks that are zoned in these ways. And so that's just important context. All right, let's go to the next slide. We have developed over the past several months that this task force has been meeting, we have developed some hypotheses, some sort of guiding principles for how we think about what might be an appropriate zone to propose for these individual blocks. And these are the guiding principles that we have discussed. The first is that we would want to choose a zone that allows for floor area ratio of at least 6.5, 6.5 times the lot size. And the rationale for that is 6.5 is the current FAR available for a community facility to be built on one of these properties. And our goal is to allow development for residential use, but not necessarily to take away what the height or the take away from the bulk of what could be built today. It's simply to say we don't want to build a commercial use here. We would like to see residential use. So the goal is a conversion to residential. It's not a downzoning. So that's guiding principle number one. A second guiding principle is that we want to choose a zone that would ensure that if these lots are developed, that they would meet the requirements for mandatory inclusionary housing. And that means a development that is at least 25,000 square feet. If you picked an FAR that was too small on one of these properties, you could potentially see development of a single family townhouse or luxury only developments. And so our second guiding hypothesis is that we would like whatever development were to happen to trigger mandatory inclusionary housing. The third is that at the same time, we don't want to propose an FAR that is so much higher that it would massively change the typical mid-block conditions and the typical Upper East Side, tall buildings on the avenues, lower heights on the mid-block. The next one is that we would, wherever possible, would like to see using, or wherever it makes sense, using a contextual zone type. Contextual zones have height limits. A non-contextual zone does not have a height limit. And we know there is a great deal of concern about height in any new development. So where possible, where it makes sense, to look at contextual zone types. Finally, we want to be consistent. So if we were looking at an avenue, we would like the avenue zones to mirror what is opposite them, what is adjacent to them. We want to make sure that we are looking at what is around each individual block to create some consistency. And then finally, we would like to grandfather existing uses and encourage sort of a mixed use area, which is very consistent with rezonings that have happened in the city of other manufacturing districts. So those have been the hypotheses that have guided us to this point. None of them are set in stone. They are a set of principles. Let's go to the next slide. And finally, this has been sort of our calendar, for the past few months and going forward. For the first couple of months, we were sort of developing the concepts of what are the hypotheses and principles and what is the force trying to achieve. We then started getting into going block by block of the blocks that are currently zoned for manufacturing or commercial only. In June, we looked at the blocks from 60th to 61st Street between 1st and 2nd Avenues. In July, we looked at a group of blocks in the East 70s, primarily east of York Avenue. Here we are in September. We are looking at blocks 1569 and 1570. So that's 90 to 91st Street between 1st and York. In our October meeting, we will look at the final set of blocks. Block 1571, which is 91st to 92nd between 1st and York. So immediately north of the blocks we're going to be discussing tonight. And then block 1557, which is 94th to 95th between 1st and 2nd Avenues. In November, we hope to have a summary meeting where we bring together, here is what we discussed across all of the different blocks that we discussed over time. Make sure, we're looking at them collectively as a whole, make sure we get community and input from feedback from the community. And then hopefully coming out of that meeting, we might have a resolution that could then go to the full board. And the resolution would hopefully be something along the lines of that we propose that the board begin the formal process of developing a rezoning proposal that could then be shared with the Department of City Planning. And the details would be what comes out of the November summary meeting. So that's where we've been and where we're going. Next slide.
Oh.
And that brings us to, let's look at the specific blocks that are on tonight's agenda. Adam.
So the first block that's on our agenda is an interesting block, and it's in fact one of the blocks that kind of got things going in my mind about why we needed to really undertake this study and propose this rezoning. And one of the main culprits was this parcel here at 434 East 90th Street. That says C8-5, it should say C8-4. So there's 3 parcels in this section of the block that we're looking at. Lots 29, lot 35, and lot 7501, which is the latter of which is a residential condominium.
And for those who can't quite see it, lot 29 is furthest to the right.
That's correct.
Lot
I'm sorry.
35
Yes.
is the center, and 701 is the one furthest to the left in the blue box.
That's right. So these are 3 parcels. They each range from around 12,000 square feet to 14 or 15,000 square feet. And under the current zoning, they can be developed up to collectively 211,000 feet for commercial. So let's go through and look at what's there now. So on the left is the self-storage facility at 434 East 90th Street. That's lot 29. This project has 10 very tall stories. It has a total roof height of 162 feet. And actually it includes excess development rights generated by the Spence Gym on the right, which our board approved the transfer of VO rights. So these are the 2 developments on this portion of the block. And then the next slide has the last parcel, which is a condominium located at 402 East 90th Street. This is a mid-block. These are all, again, mid-block parcels. This is a 12-story building and around 120-foot height cap. Just going back, the heights here are important because they vary from 85 all the way up to 162 feet. So this helps us build our idea of what the context on the block is today and what it could be for either this block and then neighboring blocks that are also part of our study. So we looked at these 3 parcels. Oh, sorry, and this is the context of the block 1569. So this is the same map recreated, going from lot 29, which is self-storage, lot 35, which is the Spence Gym, and lot 7501, which is the condominium. This is an interesting block. It is bounded by C28 along First Avenue, which is an R10 equivalent, up to 12 FAR. And then R10 along York Avenue, which is also the same residential zoning equivalent. Interestingly, opposite this block is a sliver of R8, which runs for a couple blocks, and which will be part of something we discuss on the next block. We're going to the next. So this is our. Did you want to say something, Elizabeth? Oh, you're muted. Hold on, you're muted. Can we unmute Elizabeth?
The section of the opposite block to the left of the R8, that is all a block that we are going to discuss next. So it is all a block that is currently in this group of zoned for manufacturing or commercial use only.
Correct, thank you. So with this block, unfortunately, this is kind of we're a little bit too late to the party, but this was an important block because this block is what got us started in looking at all these C8-4 zoning districts. So we still are coming up with a proposal for this block, and our proposal is guided by the rationale that we want to create consistency and we want to encourage MIH development when available. And we've proposed an R8 equivalent zone type, which would be up to a 7.2 FAR and would have a height limit of 145 feet. And this block, as we referenced, Elizabeth referenced, it is opposite C8-4 currently, which we're going to discuss. And it's also partially opposite R8, which has no height cap. And our comment is that immediate development seems unlikely given the existing land use. The condominium will likely not be redeveloped. The Spence Gym, currently it's new, so it's not being redeveloped. And the self-storage, unfortunately, has been recently developed. So that was our recommendation for this block. Do we want to take comments or questions by block, or you think at the end?
I think let's do it at the end because there are so many similarities here.
Yeah, there are some similarities. So we're going to move on to block 1570, which is totally unique from what we just discussed. So on block 1569, you have 3 large parcels essentially, whereas here we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 parcels ranging from 25 up to approximately 74 feet in width. And they have a mix of rent stabilized and market apartment buildings that range up to approximately 50,000 square feet. And this block is abutted by R8. So this little section of R8 immediately to the east of what we're studying is still a remaining R8 zone from when the R8B zoning, I guess, occurred. The R8 zoning here remained. And so we're going to do, this is what's currently existing on the block. To the left are a collection of walk-up apartment buildings on addresses 403 to 415 East 90th Street. They're mid-block and they're 5 stories generally, and they range from approximately 50 to 55 feet in height. The other portion of the block has 2 elevator apartment buildings that are on addresses 417 to 423 East 90th Street. These are also mid-block buildings. They're 8 stories in height and approximately 76 to 80 feet, according to the certificate of occupancies on file with the Department of Buildings. So again, for this block, we are employing the same rationale. We want to create consistency. We are proposing the same R8A equivalent, 7.2 FAR for this block. And again, we note that it's abutting R8 in the mid block, and it's opposite this development that ranges from 85 to 162 feet. The self-storage facility is in the 162-foot development. And while the 7.2 FAR will not be enough to trigger MIH for every single parcel, we would encourage assemblage to promote MIH because the individual lots are too small as standalone developments to encourage or to be developed with MIH. And the last portion that we're addressing this evening is the southerly side of East 91st Street. It's the northerly half of this section of block 1570. And it is improved with 4 parcels. It has 4 parcels with 4 separate buildings. We would note that, again, this abuts the R8 section of the block in the mid-block. And the developments are on lots ranging from about 5,000 feet up to 12,500 square feet. And the improvements are as small as 6,000 square feet up to 45,000 square feet. So this is the image. These are images of what currently exists on block 1570. They're manufacturing buildings. They're garage buildings with a manufacturing component. And then there's the Sacred Heart School at 406 East 91st Street. So these buildings are the types of buildings that we are targeting for rezoning. We think these are appropriate for redevelopment into residential. And these are the ideal sites to be reviewed for what we're trying to accomplish in this task force. So some neighborhood context. This is what is directly opposite these buildings on East 91st Street. You have the community facility development on the right, the community facility development that's going up as we speak at 419 East 91st Street. That will be a 7-story building and it will be 83 feet in height. And I believe that's the former Goddard property, or what was the Riverside Goddard. And to the left is a manufacturing building. Now what's interesting is this is located in the mid-block and it is mapped within the R8 zoning. So this building with the red doors, this is largely mapped within the R8 zoning. And it's a 1, 2, 3, 4, 6-story commercial loft building. And it's something that is definitely interesting to look at for what it is, given what the zoning for that parcel is. So again, with our proposal, we're looking to make this consistent across this section of the C84 zone, the mid-block. We're looking at encouraging MIH development, and we think that the goals to achieve that are going to be rezone the site for 7.2 FAR, again with the same height limit of 145 feet. And we note that it is opposite development that can take new residential buildings, and it abuts the R8 zoning. So that's an important thing to keep in mind when we're looking at these mid-block developments, is that, especially in block 1570, is that we abut R8. And it's something that we think we should continue throughout the mid-block for what we're trying to accomplish here. At the end of it. So at this moment, I think we will take comments and questions, unless Elizabeth had anything she wanted to tidy up.
No, I think we are ready to get questions, reactions, thoughts, and particularly love to hear from members of the public. So if you'd like to speak, please use the raise your hand feature. And let's go to Diego Barberina.
Diego, look for a prompt to confirm unmuting.
Hi, how are you? My name is Diego Barberena. I live at 95th Street at 2nd Avenue. As you can see, I cycle every day. And we need to take in consideration that these 90 and 91st Street are the only bicycle paths that we have in the 90s that get you to Central Park. Also, I think is 91st Street has a bus that serves York, and then it goes up to, I think it's 93rd. It's just something to take in consideration. I kind of agree with everything that has been said. I was in one of these meetings in the very beginning when they were discussing the heights and some people say no height limit, and if we can see what happened at 94th Street, then we're gonna have this tower that is like 40 stories high or 30 something. I think that shouldn't happen. So I'm happy with this 165 in my block. We have a school that is pretty tall, but it's also like 160 feet, something like that. So I'm happy with that. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Dara Hunt.
Dara, look for a prompt on your device to confirm unmuting. You should have a little pop-up.
Okay.
There you go.
I think I'm unmuted. I live on East 90th Street, and I do have, I certainly spoke out against the development of that ridiculous storage space, and I understand the goals of the group. I do have real concern about the southern side of East 90th, which is very stable, long-standing, fully occupied, a number of buildings that are fully occupied and reasonably affordable. And I would hate to see this development end in a loss rather than a gain of affordable housing. And we have seen that in the past. I also am concerned about any change in height on this narrow street, which is overburdened by MTS traffic and access to the drive. So I do have concerns about the very stable, the number of very stable long-term residential buildings on the south side, because they are relatively affordable. It is always fully occupied, and they're very well-managed buildings. I do have another question. At a meeting of this task force a number of months ago, there was discussion of outreach to stakeholders to get broad input on this effort, on this project. And I'd like to know how that's proceeding and when we will see more on that. Thank you.
Thanks, Dara. Your comments are much appreciated and your participation much appreciated. The schedule that I showed earlier, showing the November as a summary and feedback meeting. What we decided was that we would, obviously these are all open meetings, and we publicize these meetings on the Community Board 8 calendar, and so people are hopefully aware of them, but that we would use these meetings to discuss in detail each individual block, and then we would really try to promote that November meeting to all stakeholders in order to have people give feedback on the full set of proposals that have been developed on the smaller detailed basis. So that is the goal for that November meeting. And we would appreciate everybody here sharing that with their friends and neighbors in the area. And we will also be doing outreach to building owners as part of our outreach, which is not typical for the community board, but that is something that we think we should be doing for that November meeting. Okay, Harley from Assemblymember Seawright's office.
Thank you, Elizabeth. I have a question in particular about Block 1570, the southerly side of East 91st Street. You said that this is the quote ideal site for what we're trying to accomplish in this task force, in comparison to some of the challenges the other blocks would have for development if zoning regulatory changes were to be passed. Has there been, as far as you're aware, any expressed interest from developers of what they would hopefully like to do with the space? Were these regulations were to happen, or changes were to happen, and any idea of timelines? I know some of this might be a bit premature, but I'm just curious if there's been any comment from people who might have some interest in the future of these properties.
I don't know of any specific interests. The role of this task force is not to engage with developers, so we have not engaged with any developers on these sites. We've more, we're still in the stages where we're looking at what this could look like in order to accomplish the goals that the task force has set forth. So I guess the short answer to the question is we don't know what developers think about these parcels, and we don't have any information from them about that.
And I would just add to that since, for example, the Friedland rezoning on 94th Street demonstrates the danger of having developers just approach this on a one-off basis. And so our goal was to try to consider all of these sites and try to create something that was somewhat more structured and consistent across the different blocks rather than leave this up to individual developer proposals. Now, at some point in the future, do we anticipate that developers may come in and potentially try to propose something else? That happens. Not, we can't prevent that, but we do think that by getting ahead of developers and trying to create a structured, thoughtful proposal, that may go a long way to getting us what the community would like to see.
Right, and these are privately owned sites, so anything that happens will be between the property owner and the developer. I guess, do we want to go to Michelle before we go back to Diego?
I think so. Michelle?
Yes, thank you both. Again, very well explained and defined. I have a couple of questions, just what I'm not understanding. Obviously, looking at a couple of these streets that have not been developed recently as a street that has the parking and whatever, and Sacred Heart on 91st, that's fairly new building. But when you look at 91st and you look at the green building on your left on the garage, those two would be more ripe for development or new development than some of the other blocks that have some new construction and new buildings on them. So the question is, if we convert this existing block to a residential block, and to my mind, we do that with a height limit, whether it be in keeping with the R8 or with an R10A, are we concerned is the wrong word, but are we encouraging, and maybe this is our aim, development or a developer to come in and try to do something with these buildings? That's one question. On the other street where there is new construction, where the warehouse is, how do we convert that, or can we convert that to residential? But would those remain grandfathered? And for how long, if so, for how long would that grandfather status be in place?
And I was just going to say the answer to your first question is yes. And
Sorry, Adam, speak up a little bit.
the answer to your first question is yes. I mean,
That it will encourage residential development, right?
That is the point of all this.
Right.
Now your second question has to do with this block. Is this what we're asking about?
No, the block that has the new warehouse.
Oh, sorry. Here?
That one, yeah, secure space, yeah, and the building next to it.
I mean, I don't think that there's really anything to be done in the short term, medium term, or even long term about what's happened here on this block. I think that the gym is going to be the gym. And the self-storage, unfortunately, is gonna be the self-storage. And I don't
So
really.
the thought is, for clarification, if we zone this residential, these buildings would be grandfathered.
That's right. That's right.
And is there a time limit on the grandfathering? It's just when a new use is proposed.
Yeah, there wouldn't be.
That's when it would kick in, that it would have to be residential. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, I don't, there wouldn't be a time limit. I mean, they can continue to be used as they're currently being used. And there's nothing we can do to discourage the existing use down the road.
Right.
Other
Now,
than
what-
rezone the site, but we can't, you know, take away their C of O or, you know, anything like that.
Right.
just because the
But
zoning
what would
has changed.
happen if they sought to, well, it depends how we would zone it. But for example, we have 6 stories at 85 feet. We have 10 stories at 162. What happens if these existing, already built properties sought to add height? And we didn't zone it to like an R10A or something that would have a definitive height restriction. Would the fact that it's residential, it doesn't necessarily have a height restriction unless we do so. And because these properties are grandfathered, can they go up higher than we would want in terms of the zoning that we are proposing?
Not without a discretionary action, as far as I can tell.
You mean a variance of some kind?
Right, some sort of discretionary action, whether it's a variance, a full, you know, rezoning, or some sort of special permit.
Okay, so the investment that has been made by either Spence or Secure Space is fairly secure on these blocks, on this block for the moment. And on the preceding block that we had the image of, we can expect that that would encourage some residential. Now, let me just ask you a question about the little brownstone block, or the multifamily block. Was that 90? Yeah, this one, 90th Street. It seems to me, number one, if this was in a commercial or manufacturing, how come this residential was permitted to be built?
It wasn't built it pre-existed.
So it's residential. So this area was residential way before it went commercial or manufacture.
Exactly. If you think about it, you know, we would be grandfathering commercial uses where those properties have been improved for commercial use. In this case, once the zoning was created, the residential use was grandfathered.
Okay, so this residential use would be grandfathered no matter how we chose to rezone this street. And this is now, looks like what, a 75-foot height? Oh, you have it 50, 55. Okay, 5 stories. The typical mid-block and the Upper East Side would be 75. Would you be proposing or thinking about doing anything to this particular street?
So we proposed rezoning this to R8A.
75-foot height limit.
No, R8A is 145 feet.
Oh,
So that it would be consistent with the buildings opposite, which are higher than the typical R8B.
Right, so this is what's opposite. Is this 120-foot tall, 12-story building. The 85.
we have some, just to add some clarity, we have, take a street like 69th Street between 2nd and 3rd, I think. We have the Imperial House on the south side of the street, and you have smaller buildings. I won't call them townhouses, however you want to characterize them, on the north side. I don't think that in every single instance, we have to provide that kind of contextual consideration. To my mind, it could add, these are narrow streets, it could add to more congestion, and I don't think it necessarily adds to the flavor of a residential neighborhood. So if you're proposing that zoning for that particular block with the small houses, with a height limit of what you had stated, I would be in opposition to that.
So for some context, our 145-foot proposal is nearly 20 feet shorter than what was eventually developed right here at 434 East 90th Street. So
no, but I'm talking about on the 91st.
Right, so this is directly opposite that.
Oh, I thought the street I'm sorry, I thought the apartment building you showed me on the preceding slide was directly opposite that.
Well, I'm saying this section of the block is directly opposite these three parcels, where the development ranges from 85 feet up to 162 feet.
Why don't you go to your next slot, to the slide that just shows the lots, that just shows the lots of these two. Keep going, go forward. Right here. So what you see, Michelle, is these on the 90th Street, the north side of 90th Street are the small residential buildings. These are direct opposite 120-foot condominium building, which is lot 7501.
Right, and what is lot 12?
Opposite 120 feet. Then there are a couple, two of the older residential buildings, and then one newer residential building. Those are directly opposite the Spence gym. And then a second apartment building is sort of opposite both the Spence gym and the safe storage facility.
Okay, so let me just clarify, looking at this map, numbers 5 through 11 are 55 feet. And then what's 12 and 15?
Those are 8-story buildings.
12 is 8-story, meaning 810, meaning talking about 10 feet as a story.
Yes, these are them.
Okay, so that's an 8-story building, which is 800 feet, 810 feet. That's next to it. And then the one east of that is how tall?
These are both 8-story buildings, and they're up to approximately 80 feet in height.
Sorry, I'm not getting you. I didn't hear you.
They're approximately 80 feet in height.
Okay, I would just like to say that I would like the height limit that is on this street now. I would not like it markedly increased, even though the opposite side of the street has taller buildings. So in not every case, I don't feel that we have to use that as a criteria. Although I understand that we are trying to get some kind of contextual consideration here. But those buildings are old, they have affordable housing. It's been our experience in this district that when this kind of a building is torn down, that in fact we significantly lose affordable housing. And these buildings currently, they're well maintained, they're well managed, they're fully occupied, and I would not like to see any incentive for them to be destroyed. So those are just general comments, but I have more clarity now, but that's my feeling about it. Thanks very much.
So we're gonna go back to Diego, or no, unless Craig wants to speak.
Fred later.
Hi, good evening, everyone. As usual, great job, Adam and Elizabeth. So for those of you who don't know me, I live right nearby, one block away from this area. So I am really excited that we have gotten to the point to be able to discuss this tonight. And I am proud that I was one of the leaders of this effort to be able to get us to this point where we have this task force, because I was one of those who was most outspoken against the self-storage facility that is on this block over here. And the whole point of this, in essence, was to further prevent or to prevent further commercialization of these blocks that are relics of the past in terms of the zoning. So I understand the concerns that may exist about whether private developers may want to swoop in, but they may want to be doing that already. And I think the whole purpose of doing this exercise now is to try to get ahead of everything and to prevent situations that we've seen here and on 94th Street. So I think the zoning that is being proposed here is very reasonable. I think of any block that we have within our community district, these blocks are the ones that probably are most able to sustain more height and more density in the mid block because of the existing conditions. And our goal here is to be able to address the housing crisis and to be able to achieve more housing and achieve ideally more affordable housing. And this is, I think, where we are really able to have a lot of opportunities to do this. I guess my one question that I have is, so I think it's important that we are addressing the bulkier developments that exist on 90th Street that are newer. I don't think we can all just assume that the self-storage facility and that company are going to be able to are necessarily going to be here over decades. We don't know what the future lies for this company. I guess my question is, how does this play into the ability to, if that self-storage facility ever went out of business, for the opportunity for someone to come in and convert it to a residential building? And I know it's not necessarily built to be able to support that, but you never know. So I guess that's my one question that I have here.
The point of this is to create the framework that if something happens to this facility or they want to sell it, or someone comes to them and says, hey, I think converting this building to residential when rezoned is a better use of the site, we will have provided that opportunity to do that. And if it encourages more residential development, that would be great. I don't know how easily a self-storage building can be converted for residential use. That would be a new one to me, but
Right, I don't.
it's possible.
You never know.
And anything's possible.
Yeah, so I guess those are my comments for now. And again, thank you for all the thoughtfulness behind your proposal here.
Thanks, Craig. Okay, I think we are now ready to go to second rounds. Diego?
Yes, a quick comment on what you said, converting as self-storage to residential. That's what Soho was done, right? So we see this all the time. I mean, in 20 years that may happen. And as they said, I don't think that's a bad thing. Something that I forgot to say, other than the bike path, this is also the area where the garbage trucks go to the transfer station. So that's also an impact in the area. And then there was a comment about the blocks and being too small. I don't understand. I know there was an issue about the zoning, thinking that the blocks are too small to accommodate the zoning, but in my point of view, the blocks are going to be merged as needed to accommodate any development. And these blocks are going to look a little bit like the tall developments in the Upper West Side, which I don't think is terrible. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Diego. I would also add to that there are many blocks already on the Upper East Side that are substantially more densely developed on both sides of a narrow street than these currently are, or that are being that would be possible with the zoning that we're proposing. It is nothing that we are proposing is unseen already on the Upper East Side.
Yeah, and we showed some of those examples when we talked about buildings in the East 70s, like on East 73rd Street. We highlighted that. Good point.
All right, Sebastian? You had your hand up. I'm not seeing it now. I'm not sure if
I
that.
see it.
Yes. Hi. Sorry, I think it might just be obscured by the lighting behind me. Yeah, thanks for the presentation. I really love this proposal. This sounds like such a great way to take areas that are really not the right way we want to be using this land in our neighborhood to make it possible for more people to live in our neighborhood and to help lower the cost of housing for New Yorkers. It seems like we're adhering to those principles that we set out at the beginning of considering how the land is currently zoned and what height could be used. And I appreciated the comment that, in fact, in some cases, this is even a little bit less bulky than what would be possibly allowed under the current zoning for those commercial or manufacturing uses. I love this, and I hope we can make this happen as soon as possible. So thank you, Adam and Elizabeth, for bringing this forward.
Thank you.
Noah Mazer.
Hi, yeah. So this is only my second meeting. So I'm pretty new here. I was mostly just listening, but I thought I would try to lend my voice because I feel like not everyone who shows up to these may necessarily be representative of everyone who lives here. So I'm just trying to do my best. And so I just want to say, just again, thanks for the presentation. And I'm in support of these changes. I agreed with what Sebastian said. And I also have no problem with higher heights. I think that's totally great. I think having more people want to come here because people love the density of the city, and I do too. So yeah, that's all I wanted to say. Thanks.
Thank you.
Yep.
Ed Hartzog.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Thanks, Adam. Yeah, I'm all for more God knows affordable housing. I'm concerned that I'm not necessarily sanguine that this will guarantee affordable as we talk of it. And in terms of the density, I don't know. I still adhere to the view that, I don't know how the underlying cost of the land is going to promote the affordable housing for a developer on the zoning change. That's a concern I have. The height is fine, but I'm not sure where this factors in with the city of Yes. And I'm always keeping an eye out for just infrastructure support for added density and making sure we have the commercial support on the street for all the new folks that are coming. But those are just a couple of thoughts I had. But just interested in watching and listening. But again, the affordability, I'm all for that. But again, having seen, over the last 10 years as chair of the housing committee, I see a lot of density going up the block from me here on 72 up 3rd Avenue. I don't know how much of that those luxury condos are affordable. I'm just saying what I've said many times before. Anyway, that was all just a couple of quick thoughts. Thanks.
Thanks, Ed. Let's address a couple of those. The first is that this is a unique opportunity to create affordable housing because the process of changing the zones automatically makes these blocks mandatory inclusionary housing required for any development over 25,000 square feet. Now, the developments that you're talking about on 73rd Street, that was not part of an MIH block. That was an as of right within the existing zoning. And so no, it probably doesn't have affordable housing. It's probably being built as of right with no affordable housing in it. But because these blocks would be rezoned, the New York City law is anytime you are rezoning a block, it falls under mandatory inclusionary housing requirements. So that is a unique aspect of these particular blocks on the Upper East Side. That currently they don't allow residential. By rezoning them to residential, all of these parcels would be part of mandatory inclusionary housing law. So does that mean 100% affordable housing? No.
No. Right.
And does it guarantee how much housing will be built? No.
Right.
But it does guarantee that if they are redeveloped, and if those developments are at least 25,000 square feet, they must include affordable housing, meaning regulated for the income of the occupant.
Listen, I'm all for that. I just, I just know the practicality of the rubber meeting the road, and you got to find a developer who's willing to, extend capital with a lending institution or someone with pockets to take that on, and does it become economically viable for them to do it? And I get it, and
Yeah, and
that's all. There's just a lot of. My point is, just what you said. There's a lot of ifs there, and that's all. That's all.
Appreciate it.
A lot of ifs.
Brennan Carley?
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Great, thanks. Hi. So I live on 89th Street, and in the neighborhood. Other than that, and other than my own individual apartment, I don't have any real estate interests, so I'll just say that up front. Not a developer or any of those kind of things. So I guess I wanted to say three things. One is, I think, job very well done, and I support the proposal. I think it addresses the need in the neighborhood for more housing, and hopefully we don't have more self-storage units coming into the neighborhood. Second is, I'm not concerned with the height limits. I think the height limits are fine. And I think, having all arguably higher height limits, allows for more housing to be built, and we need more housing in New York. New York has a dire crisis of housing. And third, while I'm sympathetic to the, interest in affordable housing, so I'm trained as an economist. Every economic study that I've ever seen shows that building more housing makes housing more affordable, whether it's luxury housing or whether it's not. More housing equals more supply, and the simple law of supply and demand, and I'll refer you to your economics 101 class, right, reduces the cost of housing in aggregate. Maybe not for those particular units, but it makes more housing affordable for more people in the city. So great if we can have, some affordable housing in those units, but if we wind up having more units, even if they're luxury units, again, that actually at a macro level makes more housing available for more people and reduces the cost of housing. So if it doesn't specifically create, affordable housing in some of those units, then again, I think that's fine, and I think it achieves the objectives. Thank you.
We thank you. We get that point, but our number one goal is to create affordable housing as well as market rate housing.
Sure. And I would say two things. One is that's great, and I have no problem with that. Second is more housing ultimately actually does create more affordable housing, whether that specific housing is affordable or not. And I'd refer you to many, many economic studies on the subject.
Thanks, Brennan. We appreciate it. No, it's good. Sebastian?
I guess to follow up on a couple of these comments here, what options might we have if we wanted to allow for even more housing in these parcels? I understand we're looking at the R8A proposal. Just to consider the full spectrum of options, what would something even more bold look like?
So the more bold, more greater density, that is still somewhat in keeping with our guiding principles would be R10A. R10A allows for the maximum density of housing that is currently allowed in New York City, which is 12 FAR, which includes inclusionary housing. It has a height limit of currently, Adam, you know this better than I do. It's 235 feet.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. It's 235 feet. It is a form of zoning, zoning type that exists on the Upper East Side. 86th Street is the perfect example. Most of 86th Street is R10A. Fifth Avenue, Park Avenue are effectively R10A equivalents. So it basically creates traditionally square rectangular buildings with a height cap of 235 feet with the maximum density that's currently allowed.
Okay, that's great to hear. I'd love, obviously, this is a mid-block situation, and so perhaps going all the way to R10A may be too extreme. Would love, though, to consider how, even if it's just an extra 10 feet or so, can be the difference in a few more families being able to find a great place to live. So, thank you.
Thank you. Good question. I'm going to go slightly out of order here and ask Michelle, who just raised her hand. I know she is a fan of the R10A.
Yeah, I am. I just wanted to clarify. R10A, you're right about the 235, but what it is a 210 height limit, and then the bonus is for inclusionary housing, and that's how you get to the 235. So that's how it mandates it.
Thanks for the clarification. Much appreciated.
Sure.
Okay, Dara, I saw your hand up a minute ago.
Looks like she put it back down.
Okay. So I guess we seem to be through the comments and questions. I guess I'd like to see if we can get sort of a broad general feedback, perhaps Will, if we can use the red and green or some other approach for just general reactions. I'd like to get a sense of the general support for each of these blocks, the R8A equivalent proposal.
So I'll go back, I'll dial it back to.
Yeah, on a block by block.
Yep.
Okay, so the first block is the one that's the 3 large parcels that's currently the self-storage, the Spence School, and an existing condominium. Unlikely that this would, in the short term, generate new housing, but perhaps in the longer term, it could. If the self-storage center was converted to residential from where it is, if Spence School decided to build residential units on top of their gym, who knows? But Will, can you explain?
Yeah, so everybody, you should go and look for the React icon on your device. So that's the first thing. Open that up. It's going to open up a dialog menu. And so you'll see a green check mark and a red X. So I'll leave it up to Adam and Rose to decide what the green check mark and the red X mean. But what we're going to ask you to do is whenever they call on you, I'm going to actually clear everybody's feedback right now. So don't push anything yet. But whenever they explain to you what the green is going to mean and what the red is going to mean, you're going to click the green or then click the red at that same time. So we ask that if you're having problems, look for the React button on your device, press that button to open up the dialog menu, and look for the red or the green. It's a check mark or an X. Yeah. Michelle, are you having a problem with finding it?
Will, I can't do that while I'm doing the full screen share.
No, I'll tell you what you get. Just tell me what the red and the green means.
No, what I have a question about is this, is when we, and maybe you can clarify this, or maybe I missed it. When we talk about R8A zoning, we keep talking about all this zoning in terms of stories, 8 stories, 9 stories, 10 stories. As we've learned by looking at new development, in the old days, stories meant to us 10 feet. So that if you had something, in the R8, it was, I don't know, it was 9 stories or 10 stories, that was 900 feet, 800 feet, 900 feet, excuse me, 80 feet, 90 feet. Now, when we talk about stories, you're talking about, you can say something is like, it's a 350-foot building, which in old terms would be 35 stories, but then it gets defined as 25 stories because the height of each of the stories has been redefined and not redefined in a consistent way. So I'm just wondering, for the purposes of our discussion, should we be talking about R8 or 10, or should we be talking about the number of feet?
So Michelle, we are talking about the number of feet. We are saying R8A, which has a maximum height of 145 feet.
Okay,
R8 does not have a height limit. So that's
right.
what I'm specifically saying R8A, which has a height limit of 145 feet.
Okay. And
Okay.
is that going to be your proposal? So we're talking about the feet. All right. Okay, that clarifies it, because I know when we talk about it, 9 stories, 10 stories, it becomes irrelevant the way it's defined now. So is this R8A, you're going to take this block by block, but are you proposing that on each block?
Yes.
Okay,
So we're going to go block by block. So for this part, this set of 3 parcels, which is the south side of East 90th Street, the proposal on the table is R8A, which has a maximum height of 145 feet and a maximum FAR, including affordable housing, of 7.0. And so green means, yes, you think this is an appropriate height and FAR, an appropriate zone, R8A, for these parcels. And red means, no, I don't think this is an appropriate
and
zone.
instead of showing the map, Elizabeth, can you show us the streets, since I know you have the image?
Yep.
Great.
You want to show this?
Yeah, show it as you approach the street. Yeah, show us the street. Thank
Yep.
you. That's helpful to me.
Okay. So for this street, can we have everybody's red or green? This is not a determinative, we're taking names and how you voted. This is we want to get a sense of overall how the people who are in this meeting at this time view this proposal.
So right now we have 8 green and no red.
Okay, if there's anybody who has not voted, who wishes to vote, now is your opportunity. Going once, going twice. Okay, let's move on. Thank you.
I'm going to clear all the feedback. So you don't have to do anything if on your end.
Okay, so now this is the north side of 90th Street. And Adam, why don't you show the pictures? This is the north side of 90th Street. And again, the proposal here is R8A, which has a maximum height of 145 feet and a 7.0 FAR, including affordable housing. If you think this is an appropriate zone proposal, pick green. If you think it's not appropriate, pick red.
All right, we are up to 6 green and 4 red. 7 green and 4 red.
And okay, let's give it a minute, and then I'm going to ask a question.
And just for your records, there are 17 people in the room, 3 of them being you, me, and Adam. So
14 people other than
the 3 of us.
the 3 of us. Okay.
And one of them also being an elected officials rep who's obviously not going to be voting as well. So
13 potential votes here.
yes.
Okay. So going once, going twice.
7 to 4.
Okay, great. For the 4, and I just want to clarify, I'm interpreting your no vote as you don't want to increase the height of the existing buildings, or you don't want to create incentives to redevelop the existing buildings. Do I interpret that correctly? I've got a thumbs up from Judy Schneider. Thank you, Judy. Anybody else in that red group who wants to?
Michelle's nodding along as well. So.
Thumbs up, Dara, Michelle. Okay, so that is helpful to understand what the concern is. So thank you. The one thing that I do want to add, just to the conversation on those block is, let's take for a second the possibility of rezoning those to R8B, which would be sort of the other zone that potentially makes sense there. There you would have limited potential, very limited potential to build something new that's bigger. But you open up the potential that these smaller, older buildings could be redeveloped to single-family townhouses. And I just want to see if there are any thoughts on that. Judy?
What would, excuse me, the tallest buildings at the end of the block, how tall were they?
They're around 80 feet, roughly.
I'm sorry, Adam, can you get closer to your mic?
They're around 80 feet. Within the mid-block, they're around 80 feet.
Okay, so the existing buildings are taller than the R8B is 75 feet, no?
Yes.
Let's say they're pretty close.
Okay. I just feel I would leave that block alone.
So leaving that alone leaves it as a manufacturer, as a commercial block.
So you mean they could tear it all down and build some kind of big factory there?
Yes.
Well, then I guess I would go with the R8B.
Michelle was nodding along to that as well.
Ed?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I guess they could do that. I would, my concern is, again, it's the demolition. That's the thing. It's the acuity of how we get there on top of where we're at. So for this block to redevelop, that basically that means you're going to have to put in something. So you're going to lose some apartments on the way. You probably knock these buildings down. You put something up. You might get more apartments, but these might be rent stabilized. And what comes back, it's a concern. It's I don't know. I'm with not. I guess where I'm at is I don't. R8B sounds, yeah, it's sort of like Carol Merrill, down at curtain number 2, it always looks good, until it's, a lifetime supply of the giant squid that's really back there, but it always looks good. I don't know, I don't want to be for not doing anything, but, there's that old saying, you jump out of the pan into the fire, and you've done something. You jumped out of the pan. Yeah, it was kind of hot, but now you're in the fire. So I don't know. I guess I'm for kind of leaving it status quo because, again, what I see as change here is losing a large swath of what are now affordable apartments. And with all due respect to the gentleman joining us who's an economist, I appreciate that, but I would posit, having learned, economics, not necessarily a PhD in economics, but in grad school, taking it from people who were on the Council of Economic Advisors to John Yinger, taking micro with him, is that Manhattan presents, I think you will have to admit, presents an unusual situation with respect to housing, unseen in the rest of the country, because we are on a little rock. As John Phillips likes to put it, getting off the rock is the biggest part of your trip. And so this rock creates a problem. Unlike where I'm from in Northern Virginia and people around Washington, D.C., you can just go out because you've got that contiguous land. Here, it's about going up, and it's a limitation on land, so it tweaks the market in a way. And if the public policy is to have diversified neighborhoods in terms of both ethnically but socioeconomically, then the rent stabilization comes into effect and comes into play. Otherwise, the market forces, as he says, I agree with, is more housing and yes, let the market do its thing without a pure market now, not an interfered with market, mind you. But that's not what we have, and I don't mean to pontificate, but I just going forward. So I won't say it again. That is always my concern here. That is the loss, it's the demolition that creates a real problem. And what comes after, I would say last time, is not necessarily better than what it was before. And that's all. Sorry to go on so long.
Okay, Adam, can you just go to the page that shows the lots on this block and which ones are stabilized and which ones are not? So Ed, we've done that research. 3 of the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 are stabilized. The others are not. That means
that's based on the information I was able to get from the Department of Finance. There may be some stabilized units that are not made public. There could be existing units that are not on the rolls properly, on the tax rolls properly, but based on what we've uncovered, this is the current status.
Yeah. So some of them are stabilized, some of them are not. Any one of them that is not is at any moment in time a potential redevelopment. And it's just a question of what kind of development might that be. Let's go back to Brennan. Okay, let's do Brennan and Michelle, and then we still have one more block to get feedback on.
Yeah, so I just wanted to respond to the last comment, and I would say, with all due respect, the fact that we are on a rock with a very finite amount of real estate on it is arguably the best reason to allow for greater height and greater development. Status quo and not increasing the amount of housing in Manhattan only makes the price of housing more expensive in aggregate. So I'm strongly in favor of this. And if it means tearing something down and putting up something that creates more housing, so be it. If we were stuck with the status quo, we would have, 2-story wooden buildings across Manhattan and farms, and, West Farms in the Bronx would be what it was named for. It would still be farmland, right? The reason that we are able to accommodate the number of people that New York City already accommodates is because we have torn down, smaller buildings or manufacturing buildings or farming buildings at one time and put up more housing. So I'm not saying we should have, 50-story houses, 50-story, apartment buildings on that block, but that's not what's being proposed. What's being proposed strikes me as eminently reasonable and a meaningful step to increasing available housing and making housing more available and more affordable in New York. And we should applaud that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Michelle, and then we're going to go on to the south side of 91st Street.
Yeah, let me just clarify. I would be in favor of the R8B on that block.
Yep.
In terms of affordable housing and every other consideration that has to be made when we make any decision in any of our committees on this board, there are a lot of factors that have to be considered. And our aim here is to change the zoning so that we increase residential availability, which we are doing. We also have other considerations. Not every one of these blocks has to be exactly the same. We have character considerations. We have preservation considerations. They don't all necessarily come into play for this particular decision, but many things come into play when you're making a decision. Infrastructure, all kinds of things. So while the zoning here, our aim here, one of our aims was to make this manufacturing and commercial district residential, it doesn't mean that we abandon every other possible consideration that we may have when we're making a decision about anything in this city. I think a very good compromise on this block, and it won't be for all the other blocks. Don't forget, we talked about the 70s, we talked about the 60s, we're talking about other blocks in the 90s, and next week we'll be talking about still other blocks in the 90s. I'm proposing for this particular block that an R8B would be most appropriate. It doesn't change anything anywhere else, and it'll be a little variety. It doesn't have to all be the same all the time for all the same reasons. So I ask you to consider that.
We would also just want to remind you that under the proposals for City of Yes, that R8B on that block will essentially double the height of the existing buildings from 55 feet to 100
Unfortunately,
to
yeah.
105 feet. Just want to
Unfortunately,
put that out there.
it hasn't. We're doing everything we can to talk about that City of Yes, which has not quite finalized yet. We'll have a lot of problems if the City of Yes goes through on a lot of levels. But at any rate, the way it's defined at this moment, that's what we have to work with.
That is Michelle's personal opinion about the City of Yes, not the stance of this task force.
Didn't say it was. Didn't say it was.
I think we have heard both sides of this concern, and I really appreciate it, and I'm really glad that we are able to clarify the concerns and at least understand all aspects here. So now let's go to the southern side of 91st Street. Again, the proposal here would be R8A, 145-foot height limit, 7.0 FAR, which is just above what could be built today. The difference is commercial versus residential. The proposal would allow residential, and the proposal has a height limit, which there is no height limit on these lots today. So this is the southern side of 91st Street. We'd like to use the green buttons for yes, R8A is appropriate proposal for this block, and red is no, I don't support R8A for this block. Use your buttons, please.
All right, we are up to 10 green and so far 0 red.
Okay,
That's where it stayed.
The strongest consensus and the most people voting. So very, very helpful. Thank you. Okay, so with that, that is our developed proposal and agenda for the evening.
Go to the last page, sorry.
Come back next month, where we will be discussing block 1571, which is now the north side of 91st Street between First and York, and the south side of 92nd Street between First and York. So the next block further north from where we've been discussing tonight, as well as block 1557, which is 94th to 95th Street between First and Second Avenues. Is there anybody who has anything else they wish to say or add this evening? Judy.
I have a question not directly related to this, but it was mentioned the Riverside Goddard building that they're building. Do we know what the use of that's going to be? And also what's the size of the building or what can you tell me about that project?
I don't know what the final programming is.
Adam, do you want to go to the photograph of it?
Yes.
So Judy, it's that white building on the right hand, sort of in the middle of the photograph there.
Yeah, are they redoing that building or are they building a new building?
This is ground up.
I'm sorry, I didn't get it, Adam.
This is a ground up development.
I'm not hearing you.
It's a ground up development.
Oh, so it's a new development. Okay. And do we know how tall they're going?
It's 83 feet, 7 stories.
And we don't know if are they gonna be living there or?
I need to get the final programming. I don't know what the final programming of the development is.
Okay, because there have been a lot of questions about
Right.
this building on the board.
Yeah, it is expected to be a shelter type residence.
Okay, any chance you can get them to come back to us? I know that's not your job, but as long as we're talking about it. Okay, thank you for a good meeting.
Okay, we have a hand up from Dara Hunt.
I just wanted to let people know that it is no longer a Godard building. It has it will be a shelter, but it is no longer going to be a stable residential shelter. It will be a drop-in, a much less structured shelter, and it's being run by a different company. There is some concern about the change in plan, but it is moving forward. I know some neighborhood people had asked our council person to establish a CAG for this development. And I don't know if I doubt that will be recognized, but there is some concern because there's a change in plan in how the shelter will operate. That's all.
Okay.
So it's not a drop-in, it is a stabilization bed. There's a difference in drop-in. That means like you don't actually even have to spend the whole night. These are for beds for up to 30 days. You can go to one of our health, seniors, and social services meetings to find information about it. And I forget what the other thing that was said there, but go to that and you can find more information.
Thank you.
Okay. Do we have any motions potentially to adjourn?
Michelle? Judy?
Yeah, I was going to, yeah, I would move to adjourn, but I was just going to say about this. There was some question about whether or not about the zoning of this. So this actually might come under either this zoning committee or originally zoning development. I don't know how that was ever resolved, but I know that there was a lot of questions about whether or not this area was zoned appropriately for this. I don't know if this change in status accommodated that zoning question in some way, but it is an appropriate question for either of the zoning committees. And I assume Judy's going to say adjourn, and if so, I second. Since I spoke, I can't make that motion.
I move to adjourn.
I second. Okay.
All right. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
We look forward to seeing you next month and really appreciate all the members of the public who came in and participated and attended this evening.